Ever feel like you're doing this teaching thing alone? You don't have to be. Shared teaching is all about sharing the workload through the power of collaboration and teamwork. Together, we'll walk through all the difficult parts of teaching and learn how to streamline our processes, fine-tune our time management, and develop a more manageable workload. If that sounds like a dream come true to you, then welcome to the Shared Teaching Podcast. Let's share in the teaching to make those dreams a reality. Now here's today's Shared Teaching. Welcome back to the Shared Teaching Podcast. I'm your host, Susan, creator and founder behind Shared Teaching. You are listening to episode 125, where we're going to talk all about modeling writing mistakes to avoid. So when it comes to teaching writing, there's a ton of different ways to approach it. Without a set plan or proper training, it's hard to avoid modeling mistakes. In this episode, I'm going to show you some common mistakes and what to do to avoid them. So let's start with mistake number 1, not being explicit. If we don't have a writing curriculum, it can be very easy to just tell our students what we want to see in their writing. Think about friendly letters. How many times have you gone over the parts of a letter only to see their letter writing and most of your class is missing some of the parts? Believe it or not, when it comes to writing instruction, this is quite common. So how can we avoid it? Well, in order to see what we are telling students actually show up in student writing, we need to be very explicit. Tell students what the parts of a letter are, but then model where they go. Talk to them about what's important with each part. Write a letter in front of them, talking out loud to yourself about what you are doing and why. And you're going to repeat this over several days. At the beginning of your letter writing unit, use a writing template that guides your students where to put their letter parts, right? Where does the date go? How do you indent? Those are the tricky parts when you're letter writing. Then you're going to gradually take it away, especially if you're teaching second graders and above. They don't need that guide for as long as your kindergartner or first graders will be. Being able to see if they can put the parts correctly is a big indicator if your lessons were successful. Teaching writing is all about telling students what you are doing, showing them, aka modeling it, and having them practice it. Consistently doing these 3 steps for each lesson will result in a big improvement in your students' writing. So let's talk about mistake number 2, not having a clear plan. Because teaching writing doesn't usually come with a curriculum like math or reading does, it can be easy to teach without having a clear plan. However, when we are modeling writing without a clear plan or idea of what we want or need to teach, it can be easy to teach too much. Imagine you are teaching a writing lesson about personal narratives, but you didn't sit down and plan out your unit. Instead, you sit down with your class and start writing a story on your easel. First, you take a few minutes to brainstorm an idea. Next, you start writing and find yourself talking about starting with capital letters, using spacing between words, what kind of word choice you need, dialogue, and ending punctuation. And then you start in on your detailed drawing to finish out the writing piece. You go to release your class for independent writing only to look at the clock and discover you've been teaching for 35 minutes and the students only have a few minutes left to write because you have a teeny tiny writing block. You decide, well, forget it. I'm just going to transition into the next subject, and then you promise yourself you'll give students time to write tomorrow. But we all know tomorrow doesn't usually work that way, and you never do have ample time for the students to practice what you're teaching them, and what you're teaching them is just too many things at one time. So how are we going to avoid this? We're going to avoid it by creating a clear path for our writing instruction. First, you're going to need to know what your students actually understand about writing. You're going to give them a writing pre-assessment. And I've talked about this before, so I'm not going to talk about it too much again today, but you can look at episode number 91 using a writing pre-assessment, and you can get all the details there. So you're going to give them a writing pre-assessment. and then you're going to analyze the skills you see using some kind of checklist, such as my free K3 writing skills progression chart, which is linked in this blog post or this blog post and podcast episode in the show notes. If you want to go ahead and get it, it is free. Once we know the skills our students need, we're going to compare them to what the standards say about where our students should be by the end of the year. That gap between what they know and what they need is where we're going to list out the skills that we have to teach. And then we're going to plan mini lessons to start teaching and practicing these skills that are in that gap. I talk a lot more about this during the upcoming free summer conference, summer self-care conference for teachers, which opens on, I believe, July 1st for enrollment. So make sure you are on my email list or following me on Instagram to get more information and to sign up. Okay, mistake number 3 is not modeling mistakes. Students need to see our mistakes. When we do not model our writing mistakes, we're missing out on the opportunity to teach our students how to fix the mistakes. So imagine modeling a writing lesson in front of your first grade class and you neglect to misspell any words. The next day you return to your modeled writing and you want to teach a lesson on editing. How do you do that? There's no mistakes to connect to the students and to correct in front of the students. So you need to make sure you are modeling mistakes. So here's how to avoid not doing it. I like to model writing for my students in a similar manner to how they might write. So this means I misspell common words like they will in order to have some kind of version that they're going to correct later. And a lot of the students will tell you, hey, you misspelled that. And you'll be like, oh, okay, I'll fix it later, right? You just kind of gloss over it. And then when you actually get down to the revising and editing, then they'll be like, oh, now I know why she did that. Okay, but you want to misspell things the way they misspell things, right? Maybe use the wrong there, or you're sounding something out phonetically. But you want to be very intentional about spelling things how they would spell them, intentionally leaving off periods or a capital letter here and there. Maybe I'm going to end some sentences or a story with, it was good, just like my students would. So then when I go through that revision and editing process, I'm going to show them what it means to fix it. So if you want information on revising and editing, I do have a podcast episode number 45. Again, that's going to be in the show notes that you can go and listen to more details on how to do that. Okay, mistake number 4 is not allowing students to copy. Oh, how our students love to mimic our writing, right? When students are unsure of themselves or they are not strong in spelling and writing, they will copy our work. I know our goal is not to have 20 perfectly executed stories that look and sound exactly like what we have modeled, but in all honesty, most students will start to branch off and write their own stories. So here's how to avoid it. In the lower elementary grades, it's not easy to avoid having students copy your work. Although it's not ideal to happen throughout the whole entire school year, I say let them copy. So you're not really avoiding it, you're allowing it to happen. I want you to set a goal when you expect them to start doing their own thing. Is it by the end of the first semester? Is it by October? Have a plan in mind and notice the students that are still doing it. Usually it's only going to be like 2 or 3 of your students that continually copy everything that you do. And there might be a reason why. So you're going to look at why they're copying. Maybe they're having trouble with pencil grip. They can't sound out their words. They're having trouble coming up with ideas. Providing lessons to help them solve these struggles is key to getting them away from copying your writing. So if the whole class is not struggling with this, then this is something that you want to address on a one-on-one or small group moment. You're not going to take the whole class to do a mini lesson on it if only a couple students are doing it. Once those students have the tools to be successful with writing on their own, they're going to break away from copying your writing. Okay, so it's okay. They just need more tools and support to kind of be weaned away from copying everything that you do. All right, last but not least, mistake number 5 is completing an entire writing piece when you're modeling. Sometimes when we're modeling writing, we feel like we have to craft the entire writing piece in front of our students because we want them to understand how we start to end a story. And not only that, but we might also feel that we have to plan, write, revise, edit, and publish within just a few days' time or week after week after week. Here's how to avoid it. We're going to have that clear plan for what we're teaching so that we avoid doing too much when we are modeling for our students. Trying to do all the parts of the writing process week after week, or having to do a whole entire story in front of our students every time we're modeling a piece is too much. We have a lot of skills we want to teach our students, but we need to slow down and model just one thing at a time during each mini lesson. We don't need to model an entire writing piece if we are wanting students to focus on using a descriptive beginning. If we model the beginning, the middle, and the end, we're going to lose the focus of showing students how to craft a great beginning. They'll probably have forgotten what you're trying to teach by the time you get to the end of that lesson, right? So just focus on the part you want them to learn. If you need help avoiding writing these mistakes, you need to have a plan. Make sure you download my free writing skills chart, great for kindergarten through 3rd grade. It tells you the skills that your students need in each stage of the writing process. So go ahead and check that in the show notes to go ahead and sign up to my newsletter and download it. And those mistakes again were not being explicit, not having a clear plan, not modeling your mistakes, and not allowing students to copy from you, and completing an entire writing piece in a modeling session. I hope you found this podcast very helpful, and stay tuned next week for an all-new Writing Wednesday weekly tip and a full-length episode. Bye for now. If you've loved this show, then join me in sharing the teaching,
hitting that subscribe button,
and leaving us a review on
iTunes
so we can be found by more teachers like you who are ready to start sharing the workload. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Find new episodes each week on sharedteaching.com. Thanks for listening to the Shared Teaching Podcast.